Hey guys, yeah, this is Cyber of Cyber Unlimited, and today I'm going to show the workflow of how I got the chaos render. Okay, so for those who haven't seen it, I created this cool HD wallpaper using Cinema 4D, RealFlow, and Photoshop. So this is the wallpaper. You can see some nice reflections all over, some nice highlights, some cool text. I mean, it's pretty great. And I'm going to go through the process, but I'm not really going to start in the tutorial from scratch because the work took me about 72 hours of work. So I mean, it would have to be the longest tutorial ever for you to see everything, but I'll just go through the process, and I'll try and drop the project file so you can take your time to look through it. Alright, so let's start. Okay, this is just the wallpaper. There's also a video animation I created for it, some abstract motion graphics, and this is it. Okay, so it's basically which breaks into particles and this sort of sweet, sexy animation. So let's see how we can achieve this look. Let's see how we can achieve this look. We'll start off in Cinema 4D, and all that we require is a plane. So you hit T, scale it up, and the next thing we need is a sphere. That's all. You don't even really need a sphere, you can just delete it. All we need is a plane, and what you have to do next is go to plugins. That's if you have the RealFlow Cinema 4D plugin installed. You could also do this in 3ds Max, and go to RealFlow SD exporter. So just click it, save your file wherever you want to save it. I'll save it under video tutorials, and I'll call this C.H.A.O.S tutorial. Okay, so you just add your plane, add or make the number of frames to about 900, and click export. So when it's done, you just close Cinema. And yeah, save changes. So we call this C.H.A.O.S tutorial again, and we jump into RealFlow. So in RealFlow, you go to new project, you call this C.H.A.O.S tutorial. I know it's a bit repetitive, but bear with me. Create a new project. Now you come to import object, and you go to the place where you saved your tutorial file. So that's on my desktop. I go to video tutorials, and I choose C.H.A.O.S tutorial. So my plane has been imported. Okay, that's my plane object. Next, I create a sphere, and I drag it up above my plane object, and if I hit simulate right now, nothing happens. So to make anything happen, I choose my sphere and go to node, simulation, active dynamics, and I choose active rigid body, and I click on my plane dynamics and I choose a passive rigid body. In cinema it will be called a collider body. So now if I hit simulate, for some strange reason, and nothing happened. Yeah, to make the sphere know that it's supposed to actually move downwards, it needs some forces to tell it. So we'll add gravity. So gravity, now if we hit simulate, see that sphere goes, hits our plane, bounces. So that's the basic step that we need. Now what we need to do is, in the video you can see that the sphere hit the plane and shattered. So we choose the sphere, click fracture, and just break it into any number of pieces you want. For my video I chose 20, so click 20 and it fractures it. So now if I hit simulate, okay, we haven't assigned any rigid body to our sphere, our fractured sphere. So we come to node, dynamics, rigid body, and choose active rigid body. And then for our original sphere we can just turn it off to inactive. So if we simulate now, we should have our fractured sphere falling to the ground, like shattering, breaking into millions of pieces. So it's very processor and memory intensive. It takes a long time. So if you are not using a laptop, I mean, if you are not using a high-powered PC, I would not even suggest that you try this at home. So not to bore you, I'll just save the time and go through the basic process. Okay, so we just reset it, and now that we understand the basic process, I would go to the file where I did the initial animation. So remove all and import that one. So it's basically the same scene. We have our fractured sphere here. Let's go through the items here one by one. We have an attractor, we have a cube, we have drag force, we have an extrude nerves which are imported from cinema, we have a fill object, we have gravity, we have magic, we have particle mesh, we have plane, sphere, and our fractured sphere, and then we have K volume. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is our sphere, which we created earlier on. And if you look at it right now, you can see that it's dimmed. Okay, and if I click it and we check the simulation parameter, we can see it's inactive. Not only is it inactive, but under display it is not visible, so you can't even see it right now. But I animated it later around this point. You can see it at the bottom here, okay, to be visible. Now I'll explain why in a bit. So we also have our fractured sphere, which is this one, which is moving downwards, and when it hits, it breaks into a million pieces. Now the trick was I filled the original sphere with particles, with water droplets or liquid particles, whatever it's supposed to be. Okay, and I animated it to be visible just at the point where my sphere hits the ground. So you can see that it even begins to break into pieces, whilst the my original sphere containing the particles is still 100% sphere. But because it's frames per second, the normal eye would not be able to catch that. So in the next frame, it just brings out particles. Okay, so in RealFlow, I know this is not really a beginner's tutorial for RealFlow, but I'm just going through the process of how I achieved the C.H.A.O.S render. Okay, I would probably take time to create a more in-depth tutorial for RealFlow. So when I click on it, you can see that from frame 20, from frame I think 26, my sphere is inactive, but at frame 28 it is active. Okay, so which means it can now be seen, and then at frame 30 it is inactive again. And under RealFlow you need to create an emitter for the particles, and there are many forms. You have circle, square, sphere. That's the shape the emitter will take, triangle. And there's also one unique emitter object which is called the fill object. Now basically what a fill object does is, if I should create a rocket object right now into my scene, let's just position it somewhere here. If I create this rocket object, okay, I can create a fill object which I can just create a fill object and cause it to fill the volume of this rocket or any other 3D object I would model or create or import. Okay, so all you need to do is create the fill object by clicking the emitter icon. The emitter icon are the three blue dots you see over here. Show particle fluid menu. So when you click, choose fill object. When your fill object comes, under fill object you choose object. So just click and then you choose any of the objects in your scene and you click OK. So right now I could just choose my rocket and press OK. So immediately you get another option which says fill volume. So if you turn it on to yes, you can now see that there are some blue dots on my rocket. Okay, so if I should just probably hide my rocket, you'd see that it's filled with particles. Where's my rocket? Yeah, this is my rocket. So if I should turn visible to no, you can see the particles which formed the rocket, but they are not enough as at this stage, so you can't really tell. I mean, it doesn't look too good. But then you could just go to your fill object and increase the number of particles which form your your rocket or wherever it is. Okay, so let's do our rocket. Good. So that's the fill object here, which filled the volume of the sphere which was hidden down here. Okay, so I've filled the thing and I've animated it to start just after my fractured sphere crashes to the ground and begins to shatter or break into a million pieces or 20 pieces as we chose in the original animation. Then next we have a K volume. What a K volume does is it's a kill volume. It kills anything outside the boundary of the volume of your square or box or whatever you create it to be, because RealFlow will calculate every single particle's position, force, mass, weight, interaction with other particles. So it would really kill your computer. It would require lots of memory and processor power for you to just leave the animation to be going on or the simulation to go on without a kill volume, because some of the particles may be so far away they will not even be on screen, but RealFlow would be calculating the individual particles that we are seeing all over here, their position, their weight, their interaction with each other, effect on gravity, etc. So the kill volume just defines a volume within which the animation should take place. Okay, so this is the kill volume. It's just a box and the animation takes place there. So any particle which moves outside of the boundary, okay, is killed. It's just deleted. So you save yourself lots of time. So under kill volume, we have two options: fit to object and fit to scene. If you choose a particular object, say maybe the plane, you could just fit it to the plane, okay, and then what will happen is anytime any object moves outside the area or the volume of the plane, it just gets killed. Or it could fit to the scene, and with that will calculate the total volume contained in your scene, okay, by the sum of the individual volumes of all the objects you have in the scene. So in this scene, I have my sphere and my fractured sphere and then my plane. So that's the option I used, and it's created in this particular volume for me. So next we have gravity. As I said, you require gravity to tell the particles to actually move downwards. And what I did was I also animated the gravity for the ball to come to the ground, but after that I turned the gravity to 0. So if you watch your strength, you can see that it's 0, so that the particles can sort of fly around and not be attracted to the ground or not be bound by gravity any longer. So if you watch the animation from here, it looks like the particles are just hovering, doing their own thing without actually falling to the ground because there's no gravity. Good. So what I did next was I added a drag force. Basically what a drag force does in physics is it sort of acts like friction. Okay, so it prevents the particles or your objects from sliding all over the surface. You don't want them to be flying around like crazy. You want it to be confined, to be limited. Okay, so even with my sphere, my fractured sphere, you can see it flying all the way around the scene. So you can imagine what would have happened if there was no drag force. I mean, it would just bounce and fly into orbit. That would be real terrible. Okay, so drag force, I mean, sort of brings sense to the entire scene. And I also have a cube here. What I did with the cube was that if you move to the very end of the animation, you can see that the particles start forming a cube-like object. You know, at this point, they are forming sort of like a cube. Yeah, it's just an idea I had, but I didn't really put it into the final video. Okay, and to have your particles move from a particular shape to the other, what you require is a magic force, okay, or a daemon. So you come to daemon, you click daemon, and you choose magic. And then under magic, so I have a magic daemon here. You choose the object the particles should form. So I just came and I chose cube and I pressed enter. Okay. Then the approach strength, the escape strength, you can play around with it on your own. Cool. So then finally we have an attractor. Basically the attractor is what created the sweet sexy animation you are seeing. So you can see this is the attractor highlighted in green. It's sort of like a magnet shaped object, and what it does is wherever it goes, as the name says, the particles follow it. So I just animated the position of the attractor and got the particles to move along with it. So you can see all over here that the particles are following the green thing wherever it is going. And that's pretty dope. That's very nice. So after all that, you just come and you click simulate. So when you click simulate, it will now simulate the entire physics or dynamics object or whatever it's supposed to do. And when you are done, RealFlow cannot stand on its own as at now. Okay, it will not be able to create a video for you to just take into After Effects or whatever compositing, whatever you have. So you need to actually get it as a mesh which a 3D program can recognize and utilize. So you come to this icon here, this green icon, and it says show mesh menu. When you click on it, you click particle mesh render kit, the very first option, and when you click it, it will come and automatically add all your emitter objects you have in the scene into it. There will be like a subset of it. So now when you click simulate, it would mesh them and create the green files are the things which have been meshed, so they can be recognized by a 3D program, and you can texture and light it and everything. Okay, so when you are done, you just go to export, and then you choose hold on. Thank you. Go to file, yeah, and you update SD scene. So when you click update SD scene, it will update the SD scene which you saved in Cinema or 3ds Max. And when you go back to Cinema, you realize that the changes have been made. So let's go back to Cinema and let's see what happens. So Cinema is loading. Alright, so when Cinema loads, you just go back to the file you saved for Cinema. So in this case, that would be my C.H.A.O.S. And what you do is you go back to your plugins, choose RealFlow Mesh Importer, and just click it, and it will give you this icon here. You come to file path, you click, and then you choose where you actually saved your RealFlow mesh files. Okay, there will be some .bin files. Alright, and once you do that, it would upload the files as we see in this scene here, complete with the animation and simulation from RealFlow. But when it comes, it will not come with any texture of any sort. Okay, so you would have to texture it yourself. I use the Daniel Glossy. It's one of the default preset textures which came with Real Cinema 4D, and then I applied the same material to the background and the floor object. So when you are done, you import your lights, or set up your lights, and yeah, you just choose your output settings. I did full HD 1080 pixels. You save it, you choose the anti-aliasing options which will best suit you. You turn on ambient occlusion, global illumination, and you render. But the global illumination and the ambient occlusion would kill your memory and your processor, so I'll pause the video here whilst it renders, and we'll be back. Yeah, so as we can see, it hasn't finished doing that. That's why I paused the video. I'm really sorry I didn't. Okay, so let's just skip it. So after texturing, lighting, you save, and what I did was I just took one of the frames, like around here, and then I rendered it out as a JPEG image, and then in Photoshop I brought it into Photoshop. So let's see what we did in Photoshop. Okay, so we have hue and saturation. If I turn it off, we have a curves adjustment. We have the images on top and the images below to get the feel that the text is really inside the picture. So I just duplicated the image and just how do you call it, just did some basic masking for the text to look like it actually belongs into the scene. Alright, and then with my text, what I did was I applied a bevel and emboss to give it a 3D look, not too much, and then also to apply the lighting, because you can see that the lights in the scene sort of are on the left side. It looks like they are coming from this side, looking at this highlights and reflection. So I just used the emboss settings and adjusted the angle for it to look like this. You can see that this side is white, like it shows some highlights, and the inside part is yellow, which shows that the light, it matches the light source in the scene. And then I also added a stroke to the text, and the stroke I just picked a color from some of the shattered sphere pieces. So basically that is it. So if I turn everything off, this is what it looks like. And I also applied saturation, hue and saturation, to change the color from this original red color render which I had, which is pretty cool also. Yeah, this is the original render I had, and I applied the hue and saturation and changed the color to this kind of creamy chocolate, toffee candy look. I really liked the results. So turning on my curves adjustment and my hue and saturation, this is what I got. So this is how the wallpaper look was achieved. I would show how the video look was achieved in After Effects, but basically it's the same process we went through. Just did hue and saturation adjustment, and then did some rotoscoping of the video, duplicated it and put it on top for it to look like the text really is in the video, the animation. It looks like it's in the scene, it blends so well with it. So yeah, Mr. Benzino and every other guy who was wondering how I achieved the look, please, this is how it was done. I'm sorry if this tutorial was too long, but I believe it's pretty much worth it. For RealFlow, I have to take my time and really get a good RealFlow tutorial and probably a proper Cinema 4D tutorial out there. So I'll try my best to drop the project files. So take care, see you, have a nice day, bye.